Classrooms today are increasingly diverse, and there is a trend towards inclusive education for all students. While inclusive education is best practice, it comes with many challenges for both teachers and the students. In this presentation, I will review the ideas and theories behind differentiated instruction. I will discuss the types of differentiation and provide concrete ideas for modifying the general education curriculum for multiple learners and needs. I will also include ideas using universal design for learning and review learning barriers and how to create lessons with all children in mind. Lastly, I will talk about the importance of monitoring behavior and embedding social skills into the academic day. You'll notice the quote by Carol Tomlinson on the bottom of this slide. "We cannot reach the mind we do not engage." This quote sums up the purpose for differentiated instruction and why we teach to engage the minds of our students. In the next few slides, I will define differentiated instruction, review the theories on which it is based, and explain why it is important and who would benefit from this instructional model. So what is differentiation? It starts with a mindset that all students are individuals, and the teacher is committed to understanding and getting to know their students. It is a responsive teaching rather than one-size-fits-all. It is also a proactive approach to teaching, where the teacher plans a variety of ways to get at and express learning. Differentiation is designed to meet the needs of diverse learners and emphasizes student responsibility, peer tutoring, flexible grouping, and student choice. This approach involves modifying instruction so that all students can be successful. Tomlinson is one of the leading authorities on differentiated instruction. And in this quote, she gets at the essence of what differentiated instruction is. And it refers to the proactive planning and anticipation of and response to student needs. Another quote reiterates the responsive teaching aspect of differentiated instruction and points to the needs being defined not only by assessments but also by students' readiness, interests, and learning profiles. Our task is to get to know our students, and this can be accomplished through a variety of ways, like determining their learning preferences or styles. I'll be reviewing some of these theories and practices in the next few slides. There are many theories or ideas on which differentiated instruction is based, such as multiple intelligence and the zone of proximal development. One theory is based on Howard Gardner's idea that students learn through various intelligences. It is important to use a variety of intelligences when providing instruction because students learn in different ways and through many intelligences. Many teachers only use one or two ways of teaching, mainly verbal or linguistic or logical or mathematical, which can cause a problem for learners who are weak in those areas. There's been a lot of research done using brain studies, which discovered that different types of learning occurs in different areas of the brain. Also, each person's brain might act differently to the information that is being taken in. The theory of multiple intelligence embraces the notion of recognizing different kinds of smart. We can allow for these differences when planning our lessons and our assessments so that we can allow students to learn in a way that is best for them. By using a learner's preferred intelligence, you help them become successful academically, and you engage them to keep them on task. Also, incorporating other methods of instruction such as cooperative learning allows students to use their other intelligence such as interpersonal intelligence. The zone of proximal development is based on Lev Vygotsky's concept and encourages students to work their appropriate level. It is the level at which a student can perform a task with the guidance of an adult or a more capable peer. It uses scaffolding to teach a student at their own pace. Students work at a higher level when they are exploring content that is new and unknown, but not to the point of frustration. It is for all learners, including those above grade level. Instruction is adjusted to be challenging and always at the right level. Sociocultural theory is another theme in Vygotsky's theoretical framework. And recognition of student differences and the response to them are socially constructive phenomena. As a result, differentiated instruction is considered as much as a philosophical orientation as it is a best teaching practice or theory. So we know the theories behind the creation of differentiated instruction. So why differentiate? It's a way to address the needs of our students. There are often gaps between the learner and what they need to know. And differentiation incorporates various methods to bridge those gaps. I'll be discussing more about this in later slides. It's also student-focused. It starts where they are as learners and allows them to work at their own pace and pursue their interests, which helps engage and motivate them. You might think that differentiation is for a special kind of kid, but in reality, all children have differences in their level of readiness. They all have individual interests, talents, and skills, and every student has a preferred way of learning and ways that just don't work for them. So differentiated instruction is beneficial for all students in your classroom, and getting to know your students is the first step towards differentiation. So there's several ways in which teachers can differentiate instruction. You can differentiate content, process, and product based on the characteristics of the student, which are readiness, student interest, and learning profile. A student readiness is different than ability. It can change over time, and the goal is to push the student a little beyond their comfort zone and then provide support in bridging the gap between known and unknown. Through support and scaffolding, we are encouraging growth in that student. When using student interest to guide differentiation, the goal is to motivate and engage them. We can tap into their curiosity by giving them a sense of choice and voice regarding their learning. When differentiating by learning profile, we want to think about how each student learns best. As discussed earlier, we know that there are all types of learners and ways of thinking. We need to help our students learn what works best for them and offer those options or opportunities so that they can find a good learning fit. In the next few slides, I'll go into more detail about how to use readiness, student interest, and learning profiles to differentiate content, process, and product. Content refers to what we teach or what we want the students to learn. We can differentiate what we teach. For example, some students might be working on fractional parts and whole, while others in the classroom are working on converting mixed numbers to improper fractions. We can also adapt or modify how we give access to what we want them to learn based on their needs. The material or information should be at an appropriately challenging level of complexity. It should include ideas and materials that build or extend student interest, and it provides a variety of ways to access materials based on their preferred learning style. Differentiating process refers to how students make sense of the content or ideas and skills to which they have been introduced. In an activity designed to help a student progress from a current point of understanding to a more complex level of understanding. When differentiating in response to student readiness, you want to be offering a range of activities that are designed to clarify thinking and challenge them. You could assign different homework based on their current needs. When differentiating based on students' interests, you might include a strategy such as cooperative learning, where students select the same area of interest to explore. You want to give them choices or link personal interests to a sense-making goal. When differentiating in response to learning profiles, you might have multiple versions of a problem or explore or express what they learn through movement, art, verbally, or creatively. They can work with a partner or alone. The goal is to encourage students to make sense of an idea in a preferred way of learning. Differentiating products includes initial and ongoing assessment of students' readiness and of student goals. Testing students prior to content introduction, coupled with ongoing assessment, enables teachers to provide an appropriate menu of choices and scaffolds within the many needs, interests, and abilities of students in an academically diverse classroom. Appropriate student product also allows numerous means of expression and alternative procedures. They demonstrate what they learn in the unit while not making it too easy for some and too hard for others. It's a culminating learning experience assessment, not just a single lesson. When differentiating in response to readiness, create an assessment rubric for each type of product and tap into their interests by allowing them a variety of ways to express what they learn, set their own goals, and project assignments. Support your students with varied modes and models of expression, materials, and technologies. There are strategies that you can use in your classroom, and these strategies can be used to differentiate content, process, and product for the student. They allow students to take more responsibility for their own learning. I won't go into too much detail with these strategies, but I thought it was important to see that there are many strategies that are used to support differentiated instruction in the classroom. And some you might be familiar with, but they're used a little differently than you may be used to. A couple of strategies, such as providing tiered assignments and using learner contracts or learning contracts, are used a lot in differentiated instruction and not as much in other classrooms, so I'll touch on them briefly. Tiered assignments allow students to all work on the big idea or get at the big idea or concepts and practice using different skills to help them understand it. But they might be working at varied levels of complexity depending on their interest, learning style, or readiness. Learning contracts is an agreement between a teacher and a student, and it gives students freedom to decide which tasks to do and in which order. The teacher can differentiate by varying the content in the learning contract. It keeps a child on track and actively engaged in what they are doing, and they do it independently, but they will have an opportunity to periodically check in with the teacher to go over the contract and see how the student's doing. When you think about modifying curriculum, you don't want to write separate lessons for each type of need in your classroom. That's a pretty daunting task. You can use the same kind of curricular and instructional approaches for all students in your inclusive classroom. You want to begin with the universal approach to curriculum and instruction, and then individualize as necessary. We will discuss the universal design for learning later in the presentation. For now, we want to think about all learners being part of a continuum rather than a separate category for special education or gifted students. Therefore, you should adjust for all students, not just for those with IEPs. The curriculum should be flexible to accommodate learner differences. One could look at the equalizer example that Carol Tomlinson had in her text as a way to think about students on a continuum. She gives the example of designing differentiated instruction being similar to using an equalizer buttons on a stereo or CD player. You can slide the buttons across several different continuums to get the best combination of sounds for each musical piece. In differentiated classroom, adjusting the buttons appropriate for various student needs equalizes the chances of being appropriately challenged by materials, activities, and products in your classroom. So what that means is learning might look different from student to student. One approach that is recommended in an inclusive classroom is called the integrated or multidisciplinary curriculum approach. This approach connects curriculum from different areas of study. Through hands-on activities, students make relevant and meaningful connections to real life. In a variety of ways, they can express their learning. And the units are organized around essential unit themes, which allows students with different abilities and learning styles to approach it using a variety of source materials, instructional methods, and modes of demonstrating their learning. One way is to provide hands-on learning using thematic unit of study. You could incorporate centers into your daily schedule so that students can practice, apply, and extend the skills or concepts they are learning in the unit. When you first begin planning the unit, you should identify the learning objectives and outcome goals for all students. And then you should address goals for students with IEPs that are included in your class. Then you will address any barriers for those students to accessing the main goal of the unit and identify the accommodations that will be made in order to remove those barriers. This approach also emphasizes using activity-based lessons to engage all students. Hands-on learning is particularly important for those students that may have cognitive deficits or learning disabilities because many of them benefit from interacting with concrete activities. Using multiple modalities like graphic organizers and visual strategies also help to make their students' thinking visible. Once you've identified the goals of the lesson, the students' goals, and the accommodations needed for success, there are some things that you can do to your lesson to modify it, with the goal being that the student learns the main concept or idea of the lesson in their own way. Here are some ideas for modifying a lesson for students that have an IEP. You'll notice that in most cases, you're not changing the lessons, but adjusting or adapting them so that it will allow your students to access the content in a way that is best for them. You might also have students that are above grade level or are identified as gifted and have an IEP. For those students, you'll need to provide challenges so that they're always reaching a little further than their current capacity. This will ensure that they are motivated to learn and are engaged. Just like your students, you'll have to use your creativity to design lessons for this group. Here are some ideas for modifying a lesson for students that are considered gifted or above grade level. You'll notice the bolded words here, and they point to higher order thinking skills. They provide students with a way to answer questions and think deeply about a topic. They also take advantage of their inventiveness and creativity. Before you modify the lesson, you might want to start by asking yourself the question, how can I design my lesson from the beginning so that I can meet the needs of all the learners in my classroom? How can I set it up so all students can do their best work? One approach to answering these questions comes from the educational concept called Universal Design for Learning. The approach focuses on making instruction more accessible for everyone and reduces or eliminates barriers to learning. It's based on research that shows the neurological components of learning and that different areas of the brain are used for different learning activities. Also, each student's brain works a little differently. So if we're designing lessons and curriculum, we want to make sure that we are accessing all areas of the brain and providing multiple ways at getting at the what, why, and how of learning. There are 3 essential qualities of the Universal Design for Learning to consider when you're designing your lessons, and they are multiple means of representation, multiple means of engagement, and multiple means of expression. Within each of these qualities are methods designed to overcome learning barriers. So multiple means of representation is the what of teaching and learning, where students are provided with a variety of ways to receive and interpret information. Different ways of presenting information reduces physical barriers to learning, as well as sensory, perceptual, and other learning roadblocks. For example, you would provide guided notes and a visual presentation like a Prezi or PowerPoint while lecturing. This would provide auditory, visual, technology, and kinesthetic ways to learn the content. Multiple means of engagement refers to the why of learning. It considers different ways to motivate or challenge students. You can focus on providing options in the learning environment, like providing opportunities to move about the classroom, provide a quiet area to work. You might want to let the students pick their own goals to work on. Also provide opportunities for collaboration or a list of projects that get at the same content, but students can choose which project they would be interested in doing based on their own interests and learning styles. Multiple means of expression refers to the how of learning. How can the student express themselves? Students work using their learning preferences and areas of strength. Some examples would be to provide different ways to present a project to a class. Maybe it's a video they create, or a role play, or a Prezi. You could provide opportunities that have a performance assessment instead of a typical paper and pencil test. There are 4 components that teachers should consider when they are developing curriculum for a group of diverse learners. They are goals, materials and resources, methods, and assessment. When developing goals for a lesson, you'll first consider the big ideas of what you want your students to learn. Then you'll develop goals and objectives by using verbs that give the greatest amount of accessibility. Verbs like express, generate, or receive information from a variety of sources allow all students to participate. By initially writing clear, accessible goals and objectives, fewer adaptations will need to be made along the way, which definitely will make things easier for you in the long run. When thinking about materials and resources, this is where the use of technology is important. The traditional textbook's okay for some, but does not reach all learners. For example, it might be too hard to read or understand for some. Someone might have a physical disability where they cannot hold a book or turn the pages. Using technology like online texts that can also include audio as well as print, and a way for the students to understand the text built into the design would be an example of maximizing accessibility for all learners. Videos and other resources fill in the holes where traditional text lacks. Methods refers to providing curricular methods that are flexible and diverse to provide a variety of learning experiences. For example, you could provide models or examples of what you expect. When considering what methods to employ, think about multiple intelligences and learning preferences of your students. You want to incorporate multiple means of representation, engagement, and expression into your lessons. Finally, assessment, it should be linked to your learning goals and objectives. And to make assessments accessible to all students, you want to look at the child as a whole and use both formal and informal methods throughout your instruction. In the next few slides, we will discuss the importance of monitoring behavior in the classroom. When you have a classroom full of diverse learners, you have an increased chance of having students with behavior problems. Sometimes these behaviors might mask a need for additional supports either academically or behaviorally. They might have a skill deficit that might not have been picked up on before because their behaviors are taking the focus away from the real problem. For this reason, it's important for teachers to be monitoring, assessing, and providing interventions for behavior in the classroom. I just want to point out that quiet or disengaged students may be struggling with academic or social skill development just as much as the loud or disruptive ones. That's why There's a universal approach to screening associated with the response to intervention model for identifying students and providing them with different levels of support depending on their needs. This positive behavioral interventions and support is a proactive approach, and it's a school-wide approach to defining, teaching, and supporting appropriate student behaviors to create positive school environments. There's 3 levels of support in this model, and it's similar to the response to intervention model used with academic interventions and screening. The first tier is primary or universal support prevention. All the students are exposed to a core social behavior curriculum to prevent the development of problem behavior and to identify students whose behaviors are not responsive to that core. The second tier involves targeted support prevention, and it occurs when supplemental social behavior support is added to reduce the current number and intensity of problem behavior. And the third tier involves more intensive support intervention and provides students with individualized and intensive behavior support. This tier was developed to reduce complications, intensity, and/or severity of existing problem behavior. One critical system for assessing all students and evaluating them is by using ongoing assessments and progress monitoring. If a student has too much or too little of a behavior, it might be time to assess the child and provide individual support. The first step will be to identify the behavior and provide clear definition of the troublesome behaviors. The next step would be to track the behaviors so that you can get a sense of how frequently it occurs. This initial data is called baseline data, and there's multiple ways to collect this type of data. And a common method is through direct observation, which is by the teacher observing the behavior and then recording what she sees. The data would contain the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. You can also collect data by monitoring the frequency of targeted behavior. You would find a method of tracking the data throughout a specific time period and then record your results. You may also choose a different method of tracking student behavior called sampling. You would use this method to record continuous behaviors such like off-task, non-compliant, or disruptions. Once you've collected your data, it will be used to inform the interventions that you and your team choose to implement for the student. Certain behaviors that you will see in your classroom might come from students' social skills deficit. In this case, excuse me, you may need to provide some social instruction in your classroom. Students who are socially competent are more likely to be successful in school. Our students come from a variety of backgrounds, different home lives and experiences, and sometimes they come to us not knowing how to interact with their peers, or they have difficulty relating to other students or fitting in. The classroom is an excellent place to define, teach, model, and practice using these social skills. You don't necessarily have to plan a specific lesson, although that is a good idea, but you could just take advantage of any opportunity you can to talk about it. Some examples of social skills that might be taught in the classroom would be manners and positive interactions with others, appropriate classroom behavior, better ways to handle frustration and anger, and acceptable ways to resolve conflict with others. Regardless of the method or strategies that teachers use to teach social skills, it's important to follow an instructional format for social skills instruction. You want to identify the skill that they need and then explain why it's important. Model the skill, perhaps you do like a role play, and then allow them an opportunity for guided practice. And then you want to have ongoing monitoring of the progress and the use of that social skill that you're trying to teach your students. Here are some tips for embedding social skills instruction into your day. Morning meetings provide a great opportunities for teachers to discuss social skills, and they can address any issues that students might have. Take advantage of those little teachable moments, such as maybe two students are arguing and then you have to intervene, and it's a great opportunity to talk about how they could resolve that on their own and give them the skills they need to do that. You can connect social skills to the academic skills, or in the context of each classroom learning environment, like cooperative learning groups, independent seat work, and how they arrive at school. And using self-monitoring and teaching them how to self-monitor, and then provide positive reinforcements. And maybe you have a token economy in your classroom. Students can earn points or tokens for doing desired behaviors. This presentation was an overview of differentiated instruction. Each section I spoke about just scratches the surface of this topic. There are many resources available to you for further explanations. Here are a few resources that I used to create this presentation. I thank you for taking the time to view it, and I wish you luck as you begin to implement differentiated instruction into your classroom.